What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scales 13. In today's video, we're going to have something long awaited that you guys have been asking for well over a year. This is going to be my pet comparison of the Ackie Monitor and the blue-tongued skink. I hope you enjoy. Start off with, guys, I was a little reluctant in the beginning to make this video. The reason being is because I like to compare reptiles that are from the same family. I like to compare monitors to monitors and Tiligua with Tiligua. But since you guys asked for this video because both of these animals seem to be popular and everybody's trying to decide what's the one reptile they want, I want to deliver something that you guys asked for. So to begin with, let's talk about the temperament. So first we're going to start with the temperament of the blue-tongued skink. So the temperament of the blue-tongued skink is very mellow. I would compare it to something like a leopard gecko. And what I mean by that is it's an animal that will tolerate handling, but doesn't necessarily seek you out. My blue-tongued skink will crawl from my lap to my shoulder, and it'll even crawl up to my head occasionally. Now, most blue-tongued skinks won't even attempt something like that. Panther might be something that's a little bit more of a rarity, but I like that he's a little bit more inquisitive and actually seeks me out. And he's not one of those animals that literally only comes to me when it comes time for food. Now, granted, he has a big appetite, and when it's time to eat, that's all that's on his mind. But at the same time, he doesn't necessarily dislike me in any type of way, so that's good to know. Now, Thunder, on the other hand, is a little bit more inquisitive, and not to call blue-tongued skinks inferior in any type of way, but monitor lizards and crocodilians tend to be two of the most intelligent groups of reptiles on the entire planet. And the Ackie Monitor is definitely no exception. Ackie Monitors are very bird-like. They'll look at something and they'll turn their head where you can see they're trying to critically think and figure something out. They use that forked tongue to taste the air and to taste different objects to see if they can figure out any chemical signals and find something familiar. They use it to seek out food, and they tend to be a little bit more interactive with their owners. So Ackie Monitors, being that they also like to climb, they tend to climb up to the shoulders and on the head and on the back of the arms a little bit more than you'll find with most other reptiles, where I'm sure you guys have seen plenty of videos of me and many other reptile keepers where we'll stick our arm in the enclosure. Next thing you know, the Ackie Monitor is crawling up your shoulders to your back, and will even crawl back into the enclosure when you stick your hand back in the enclosure, which is pretty awesome. I think both animals are very adept to being good, safe, friendly pets. Now, if you want to talk about the subject of biting, both of them can bite. Ackie monitors, of course, being monitor lizards, they have extremely sharp teeth, and they also have a very mild venom because they are indeed a varanid, where blue-tongued skinks, they tend to have more bite pressure. So, of course, any animal with teeth can bite and has the ability to bite, but an animal like an Ackie Monitor or a blue-tongued skink, when handled properly, that has actually gained trust with the owner and know who's handling it at the correct time, is very unlikely to get bitten by one of these animals. Now let's talk enclosure size. So both the blue-tongued skink and the Ackie Monitor need a considerably large cage in order to live a happy, long life. Now, we're not going to cover the subject of what enclosures are the correct size for a baby, because of course the animal is going to grow into adulthood and is going to need a larger enclosure. So just to be on the safe side, I'm only going to tell you guys what the minimum standards are for an adult of both species. So for an Indonesian blue-tongued skink, the old standard for a blue-tongued skink was something the size of like a 40 breeder fish tank, which is quickly starting to phase out as the minimum standard for a blue-tongued skink. More up-to-date information shows that a 4x2x2 is the more appropriate size. And if you guys have seen my old video where I talked about Panther's new enclosure, I actually spoke about why a 40 breeder is actually too small for an animal of his size. So of course my blue-tongued skink Panther lives in a 5x2x2 because I just wanted to get him something a little bigger. So it allows a longer thermal gradient, where it gives the animal more options for areas where it wants to lay within the enclosure and different temperature gradients. So the animal will then of course have a cool side, and the warm side is not going to be as close. So if the animal wants to seek refuge from the heat and cool its body down and get to an area that's actually going to have more moisture without those hot lights drying up the surface of everything around it, it can easily go to the cool side of the enclosure and cool down. And of course, for an Ackie monitor, now of course the minimum standard is also a 4x2x2 with a digging box, but if you're not going to add a digging box, you might as well get an enclosure that's a 5x3x2. Now both of these enclosures, the 5x3x2 and the 4x2x2, or the 5x2x2, which is right here, can be purchased commercially. And guys, compared to how it was years ago, there's multiple commercial reptile enclosure companies where you can simply buy an enclosure. They are a little expensive, but I think it's really worth it. So unless you're going to build your own out of wood, which is perfectly fine as well, if you want something like a PVC enclosure that can last you basically forever, I would strongly consider buying one of these enclosures before you get one of these animals. There's cages with a K, scale box, animal plastics, just to name a few, but they're all over the place. Now granted, these enclosures can be pretty pricey, but to me, if you're willing to buy the animal, you better be willing to buy everything it needs to survive. Next subject. So now we're going to talk about the basics of each animal's diet and how difficult it will be to maintain an animal and based off the animal's diet. So one of the positives about the blue-tongued skink in comparison to the Ackie monitor is you don't need to feed this animal primarily insects for it to survive. There's many different things you can feed this animal because it's an omnivore. This animal will eat a large variety of vegetables. It'll eat a large variety of fruits, even though that should be the smallest portion of its diet. It'll eat a plethora of insects. You can also mix in some high quality dog food as well to supplement this animal all of the vitamins and nutrients that it will need. Ackie monitors, on the other hand, are primarily insectivores. So for an Ackie monitor, it is within your best interest to make sure that if you're going to get one of these animals, that you either can find a pet shop that sells the insect feeders that you'll need, or what you can do is you can simply order insects online if they'll deliver to your area, or worst case scenario, if you can just get your hands on a few insects that don't have parasites that were bred in captivity, just breed them and have your own insect colonies so that way you'll always have a stock to pull from to feed your animal. Granted, Ackie monitors do eat a lot of insects, and if you think 100 crickets is going to do it, they're going to knock down that pretty quickly. So keep in mind that you want to have a good stock in order to keep your animal fed. Now we're going to talk about how difficult it is to find one of these animals so you can take one home as a pet. So as far as blue-tongued skinks, I tend to see more blue-tongued skinks in pet shops more than Ackie monitors. Me personally, seen Ackie monitors in a pet shop once in my entire life. My Ackie was actually bought online from Rare Earth Inc. And you can find a majority of breeders that will ship you an Ackie across the entire country of the United States. So it's not hard to necessarily find them, but you got to do some digging. You may have to go online to find your Ackie because a lot of pet shops don't carry them. Honestly, for good reason, because most pet shops don't have the proper enclosures and all the things you need to really take good care of an Ackie monitor. But at the same time, they are out there and they are pretty easily to find. Now, they are pretty pricey. An Ackie monitor does cost a few $100s. But the thing about an Ackie monitor is completely, in the United States, completely captive bred. Which is because Australia can't export any of its animals anymore by law. And the thing is, that's actually better for you as a buyer, because at least when you know you're buying an Ackie monitor, you know you're not getting an animal that's wild caught, was snatched in the wild, so it has a much better chance of surviving in captivity. On top of that, since it's been around humans almost its entire life from the day it hatched, this animal will have a much easier time acclimating to an owner, and you'll have a better chance to build trust with this animal and have an interactive, happy pet. Now, when it comes to blue-tongued skinks, even though blue-tongued skinks will tolerate handling, and blue-tongued skinks are also a very good pet to have when you've built trust with them, the thing is, it depends on the species of the blue-tongued skink and whether you got them from a breeder. Now, there are a lot of famous blue-tongued skink breeders out there, and blue-tongued skinks that are bred in captivity will cost you a couple $100s as well, whether you're looking for an eastern, a northern, or a westie. But the thing is, there are Indonesian species that are out there as well that you can purchase. But the downside to this is these animals are primarily going to be wild caught. So they are cheaper. You can probably get a common Indonesian blue-tongued skink for about $150. But the thing is, these animals can come in with parasites, so I do think that you should take them to the vet to make sure that the animal does not succumb to these parasites, and of course, so you don't get your other reptiles or people in your household sick. And on top of that, the rate of survival is much less for animals that have been shipped overseas because of all the trauma that they go through when they're snatched out of the wild. So when you look at which animal is actually better as far as able to find and buy one of these animals, I feel like the blue-tongued skink, if we look at Tiligua in general, is equal to the Ackie Monitor as far as if you want to find a captive bred blue tongue, they're just as easily to find as an Ackie Monitor. You really got to do your research and know what you're looking for and know who you're talking to if that's what you want, because there are a lot of blue-tongued skinks on the market that of course are wild caught, including my blue-tongued skink, Panther, who is an Indonesian Tiligua gigas. So another thing about the enclosure size of an Ackie Monitor versus a blue-tongued skink is that even though both of these animals are burrowing creatures, the Ackie Monitor is going to need deeper substrate than the blue-tongued skink. The blue-tongued skink, you can get away with about 6 inches of substrate and the animal will be perfectly fine for the rest of its life. Whereas for an Ackie Monitor, you're going to want at least a foot or 2 of substrate for the animal to dig into. The reason being is because you want the animal to completely bury its body in the substrate, so that way the animal can shed easily and it can also hydrate its body beneath the surface. So with that being said, as far as the vertical space, since both these animals like to dig, let's talk about climbing. So when it comes to climbing, the Ackie Monitor is definitely the better climber than the blue-tongued skink. Now, of course, a blue-tongued skink that's given some logs and a few stones to crawl on will use these spaces and actually climb on top of them. Whereas Ackie Monitors have been found on fence posts and in small trees in the Australian outback. So if you were to put a 3D background that's climbable on the entire outside of the enclosure, that would be really beneficial to your Ackie, because any space that you add for the animal to climb on, it will use. So let's recap these subjects. So if we're talking about enclosure space and how difficult it is to provide for a blue-tongued skink versus an Ackie Monitor, I would say they're about the same. The only difficulties that you would have with an Ackie Monitor versus a blue-tongued skink is that an Ackie Monitor will actually like temperatures that are slightly above 130 degrees Fahrenheit, so it might be a little tougher to get that basking spot right. But of course, you have the proper bulbs and the proper distance between the bulb and of course the basking surface. It's not very difficult to figure that out. So I would say the two are equal in that regard. Now, as far as handleability, a blue-tongued skink versus an Ackie Monitor. Now, the Ackie Monitor is definitely more inquisitive, more interactive than the blue-tongued skink. However, if you're looking for an animal that's more relaxed and more chill, I would definitely go with the blue-tongued skink, because the blue tongue is definitely not going to be as active as the Ackie Monitor. Ackie Monitors, of course, have a much higher basking spot, and they act a little bit more like a scaly ferret, if I'm just going to say something, of course, silly to compare the animals in their personality. The reason I'm saying that is because an Ackie Monitor is constantly on the move, where at least a blue-tongued skink will take a pause once in a while. So that all depends on your personality. Now, when it comes to feeding the Ackie Monitor versus the blue-tongued skink, the blue-tongued skinks have such a wide variety of different foods compared to the Ackie Monitor. The blue-tongued skink will actually be easier to feed because a lot of the things that you feed a blue-tongued skink, you can get from the grocery store since it's an omnivore. It'll eat so many fruits and veggies, and of course, since they'll also eat high-quality dog foods and such, it's a lot easier to get a meal for this animal versus with an Ackie Monitor, you want a good pet shop, or you want to make sure that you can order insects from one of the commercial companies like Rainbow Mealworms or Josh's Frogs that sells these insects, and you want to make sure that they deliver to you so that way you can have them readily available to you. So honestly, in my pet comparison, when I compare a blue-tongued skink to an Ackie Monitor, which one do I think is honestly the better pet? And to tell you the truth, a blue-tongued skink is slightly easier than an Ackie Monitor, but of course I love how interactive Thunder is, and I just love dealing with Thunder on a daily basis and watching him search out his food, because I think that actually adds more excitement to keeping Thunder versus Panther. Don't get me wrong, I love Panther and I love Thunder equally, but I think there's just more to learn and it's a little bit more interesting to keep the Ackie Monitor at this moment. But that's just my opinion. It all depends on what you want for the pet that what you want to have. It all depends on your lifestyle and what works for you, right? So I'd say both animals are equal. So I hope you guys like this video. Please remember to like and subscribe. I'll have more subjects coming, and I'll definitely have more polls up to see which video I'm going to put out next. The next video I'm going to put out after this is going to be an update on my Savannah monitor. I've had her for about a year now. She seems to be doing just fine. Anyway, I hope to see you guys in the next video, and I hope you enjoy it. Peace.